The following lesson is linked to Learning Outcome 1, Listening and Speaking. It addresses the assessment standard that requires learners to demonstrate the skills of listening to and delivering oral presentations, Welcome back to our series of lessons on oral texts. In our first lesson, we introduce the genres of storytelling, praise singing, and oral poetry. Having looked at what they are, we are now going to explore the skills and techniques used by performers of these art forms. But before we do that, let's take a look at the outcomes of today's lesson. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to identify what makes a good oral performer, deliver an oral performance effectively. In our first lesson, we mentioned that an oral performer builds up a relationship with the audience through the use of voice. That is one function of a performer's voice, but there are many others. Although the oral performer uses many tools to convey messages, including body language and gesture, the oral performer's voice is his or her most important tool. In this lesson, we'll watch some storytellers use their voices effectively, and we'll give you some pointers for using your voice more confidently when you present an oral text. Good oral performers need to vary the pace or speed at which they speak. They also need to vary the pitch of their voices, which means that their voices must go up and down. A confident performer is also not afraid to pause. You can hold the attention of the audience by stopping for a moment to allow the listener to appreciate what you have just said. Another way that good performers make their voices interesting to listen to is to vary the volume. Sometimes they speak softly, and sometimes they speak loudly, according to the meaning of their words. Another reason to change your voice is to show that different characters are speaking. A good performer can take on a particular voice to suit each different character. Maxwell Chipinga uses his voice like this when he tells stories. Here he tells a tale about a rat, a chicken, and a cow. Notice how he changes his voice when the cow speaks.
Then, rat ran, and then he went to Mr. Cow. Hey, Mr. Cow, Mr. Cow.
Yes, what is it, young man? Can I help?
Say, yeah, you see, the owner of the house is planning to kill us all in there. He's planning, he's making a plot. We have to do something about it.
Mr. Cow said, I think that is none of my business. You see, I'm busy here. The grass is so green, and I'm having fun. Please don't disturb me. Find a solution to your problem. I'm not concerned.
I bring the characters to life through speech because the character is unlike in a movie where somebody is seeing a character. Well, if somebody is doing this, they see. But in a story, you have to bring everything to build the character using the words. So basically, it's the words that matters, or how you build your character and how you want the audience to view the character.
In addition to adding variety to the way that we speak, oral performers also need to speak clearly. That means they have to pronounce their words articulately and form the vowels and consonants cleanly. Listen to the way Alice Pearson pronounces his words when he tells his story in The Hungry Years.
I know that the ways of the stranger have caused this great anger in you, but to kill this man will feed that anger for just one day. We need more of than that. We must not forget the deep ways of our people. Now, let your hunger become a fasting.
So, we have seen that the voice and the way words are used to help make an oral performance memorable. However, there is more to a performer than just her voice. An effective oral performance might involve using the rest of the body, facial expressions, gestures, and movements to help make the meaning of the story clearer. A storyteller from Kenya, Alumbe Namai, shows us how entertaining a story can be when the whole body is used.
And since he did not want to know kilichomtoa kanga manyoa, he wanted to save his life. The monkey decided to go into the jungle and start looking for that box. And he started climbing the trees. 10 to 10, 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 10 to 10.
You will have noticed another technique that Alumbe used was to involve the audience in a story through the chant. Many storytellers include a line that the audience learns and says as the story is told. Praise singers also use these techniques by including responses from an audience. Some oral performers also like to mingle with the audience members before they begin to perform. Moabi Mkhorosi tells us why he does this.
Well, most of the time I create the mood through there's a call and response type thing, the songs, the catchy songs, the catchy tunes. You use those before I start that. Sometimes I will start with something to teach people something about my culture. Sometimes I use a catchy tune. And if I use a catchy tune, people are getting involved in that, within that catchy tune. They forgot everything else. You bring them, the spirit, you become one, you know, you can become one with them. And by so doing, when you start telling your story, they are one with you. Sometimes then you don't even have to understand the language. There's one that I usually use sometimes. Each time before I started, I go, tena, tena, and everyone responds, tena, tena, tena.
Tena, 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 nana, tena, nana.
We have seen from some of these examples that each oral performer has his or her own style of communicating with an audience. It is, however, important to remember that any movement or gesture must be in keeping with the content of the words in the story. In other words, a storyteller wouldn't be dancing around with a smile on their face if they were telling a sad story. The oral performer's movement should also not get in the way of communicating a message by distracting the listeners from the words themselves. Some performers do not move around a great deal. They allow the words, the rhythm, and the voice to carry the full weight of the performance. Watch this poet as he shares part of his poem about water. Notice how his lack of movement allows us to concentrate on the words.
No water, no life. Without water, there is no life. Without water, there is strife. Without water, there is no education. Without water, there is starvation. Without water, there is no health. Without water, there is death.
In the clips of oral performers that we have seen, you will have noticed how important eye contact is in building up a relationship with the audience. Eye contact helps to convince your audience that you are sincere and that you want to speak to them. However, you should also listen to your audience. If they're responding to something that you have said, perhaps by laughing or clapping or cheering, you need to wait until they are nearly finished before you start speaking again. Otherwise, they will not be able to hear you. In this lesson, we have seen some oral performers in action, and we have discussed the techniques that they use. It is now time to think about how you would go about preparing for an oral performance. No matter which genre of oral performance you wish to undertake, you need to be well prepared. If you're reciting poetry or telling a story, you need to know your material so well that you don't need to even think about it. Even if you're presenting some praises, which will not have been written down beforehand, you still need to have done your research in preparation for your performance. Malawian storyteller Maxwell Chipinga has some points for us on this story.
That art is an art which you don't just get it just one day. You have to get used, and the best way is to practice.
Maxwell tells us to practice, and one of the ways of practicing is to perform in front of a mirror so that you can see yourself. After rehearsing by yourself, Try to perform for a friend or a member of your family and ask them for feedback so that you can improve your own performance. Just like a dancer or a musician has to practice constantly to maintain the quality of the performance, an oral performer also has to rehearse well before performing. If you are well prepared and have practiced enough, you're not likely to be so nervous when you come to perform. But if you do find that you have stage fright, there are some techniques to help you get over the nerves. Try to warm up your body physically by doing some gentle shaking of your hands and arms, by lifting your shoulders up and dropping them, by lifting each leg up and twisting your foot around to loosen your ankle. It is also very important to breathe deeply. You need a good air supply for an oral performance, and this also helps to calm you. When it comes to the actual performance, keep in mind the characteristics of a good oral performance we discussed earlier in this lesson. Here are the key points to keep in mind. Use a variety of pace, pitch, and volume of your voice. Change voice to suit a character. Speak clearly. Use facial expressions, gestures, and some movement. Actively involve your audience. Be well prepared. And finally, perform because you love it. An effective oral performance is achieved by someone who wants to share something special with some special people in a special way. If you know that you have a message to share, with practice, you'll enjoy sharing it. For an opportunity to perform, here's today's task. Find a poem or a short story that you really like. Read it through to yourself. Now read it again, but this time plan how you would present it to an audience. Mark where you would speak faster or slower, louder or softer, where you would pause, where you would breathe. Think about where there are opportunities for movement or whether you could involve the audience. Then present the poem or story to a partner. Well, that's it for today. Be sure to watch out for the next lesson in this series, where we will look at praise poetry in more detail. See you then.